Fellas, first of all, sorry for the wacky upload schedule, I've been kinda busy in real life lately. But on the other hand, Halo Infinite's multiplayer just came out and I'm having a blast with that game, so I will more than likely make a video for it pretty soon. However, today's topic involves repeating the same strat as last league, playing a fun skill twice in a row with different characters but achieving some sort of success. In this case, this is a fire conversion Spectral Helix Chieftain. With that said, there is a bit of stalling in this video, and that is because I want to cram as much gameplay from this character into it. I managed to get Uber Elder, Sirius on Awakener 8, Maven and a Cortex fight with him, and I'd really like to share as much of those as possible. For your entertainment, of course. So hey, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, otherwise a rating and a comment are always appreciated. So coming back to the topic at hand, this build is a bit all over the place, and you'll see why in just a little bit. But with all honesty, it took me a while to wrap it up because I wasn't 100% sold on it when I built it initially, so I made plenty of changes to get it to a point where I felt comfortable with it. And all of this is mostly due to me wanting to cram as much evasion and spell suppression as humanly possible into the character. Heck, at one point I even had attack block nearly capped, but I figured the defense's Kool-Aid was gonna make this a bit slower. So I decided to make some changes to have a somewhat balanced character in regards to damage and defense. Defenses are cool and all, but damage is more entertaining, to be quite honest. Having said this, the character is using some rather shiny pieces of gear which may or may not seem worth in the long run, but again, we'll talk about those in a bit. But I do want to point out a certain piece of gear in this character's loadout, which is an Anarchic Spirit Blade. The reason as to why I am using this peculiar sword base is because it happens to have really crispy stats in comparison to other non-thrusting swords, and thanks to the drop swords aka heist, these swords tend to roll rather disgusting DPS values. Mine has roughly 530 physical DPS, which made it really difficult to ignore when gearing up this character. The problem with this idea is that by playing a chieftain that converts 90% of his damage to fire, thanks to the Ascendancy and a Mastery, the implicit on this Anarchic Spirit Blade kinda becomes irrelevant. However, since the remaining 10% is getting converted to fire, cold or lightning, we can run Fizz Reflect maps or bosses without really worrying about one-shotting ourselves. Plus, we apply 5% shocks to enemies, which may seem like nothing, but hey, any damage is good damage, right? Though if you want to use a thrusting one-hand sword, or any sword base for that matter, there is no problem whatsoever with replacing the Anarchic Spirit Blade. Now, if we were to compare this guy with my previous build, this one is definitely stronger than the Inquisitor that we built last week, but it's not as fast as some of you may like, and it is also a bit more expensive to build. So do keep that in mind if you're gonna attempt to put this together yourself. You know, player retention mechanics and whatnot. But yeah, after stalling for quite a bit, and to be quite honest, hopefully enough to cram the Uber Elder fight initially, let's actually talk about the character now. Alright, so to keep things a bit fresh, I'm gonna combine gear and gems for this part and then move on to the skill tree. Anyways, as I mentioned previously, we are using an Anarchic Spirit Blade. Mine happens to have 532 physical DPS. Though in your case I'd say anything above 450 physical DPS and as much crit chance and attack speed should suffice. Any other sword base is also fine. In the sword I've got Phantasmal Ancestral Protector linked to Enhance and Combustion. Moving on, the body armor is a recurring archetype in this channel. It is an Awakener Orb slammed chest with Frenzies on hit and attack crit chance. The base doesn't really matter, but make sure it's evasion because this character is built around that defensive layer. In the body armor we've got our main skill, a Spectral Helix linked to Woke Elemental damage with attacks, Anomalous crit damage, Anomalous inspiration, faster attacks and Divergent fire penetration. Now, as a small break here, I made the mistake of using Immolate against Sirius instead of faster attacks. Even though Immolate deals more damage in paper, when it comes to Spectral Helix, speed is king. Henceforth, regardless of what PoE says, we are gonna use faster attacks in the main setup. At the same time, we are using Divergent fire penetration because it destroys enemy corpses if they die to hits while ignited, which is pretty much all the time since we are borderline crit capped, which also means that they are getting ignited 95% of the time. Though if you don't care about popping enemies, Woke fire penetration or elemental focus are good enough. Coming back to the gear, the helmet is a synthesized base that has reduced reservation multiplier for socketed skills, and we are gonna craft this helmet with deafening essences of loathing to get even more mana reservation efficiency. since we are gonna be cramming Anger, Anomalous Purity of Elements, Grace and Precision in the helmet. Thanks to this, we are gonna be a bit tight on mana, but we also got another way to cheese this. That cheese is gonna come from the jewelry, the first of which is an Elren Unveil amulet with the max negative mana cost of skills modifier on it, and we need to apply life catalysts to the amulet to push that modifier to -12. We are also anointing Blade Master on it for some damage, accuracy and attack speed. The first ring has elemental weakness on hit, to which we need to craft negative mana cost of skills for non-channeling skills. Between these two we shouldn't have any problem sustaining our little mana pool whatsoever, so don't sleep on this. Anyways, the other ring is synthesized with Onslaught on hit as the implicit. If you can't get one of these guys, any other ring is fine as long as it provides plenty of damage and any other defense stuff that you might need. Moving on, the shield is a Redeemer base with a spell suppression, some block and elemental damage with attack skills. Now, as a small break, this slot in particular has a little detail hidden. Turns out that when it comes to Redeemer influenced shields, she only provides two unique prefixes, elemental damage with attack skills and maximum cold resistance. If you cannot find something similar to mine, especially for cheap, your best bet is looking for a shield with the same modifiers without any influence and then slamming a Redeemer Exile on it. Redeemer and Crusader Exiles are the cheaper Exiles, so instead of overpaying someone, you've got a 50-50 chance of turning a decent shield into a best-in slot for this character. Anyways, we are gonna socket Val, Haste and Tornado, linked to increase duration in the shield. For the gloves, they are Tomb Fist with attack crit as the corrupted implicit. We are gonna socket a Murderous Eye Jewel on them to intimidate enemies on hit. We socket Immortal Call and Blood Rage on the gloves. The belt is a Darkness Enthroned, with two identical Abyss Jewels. In fact, they've got the same modifiers as the one in the gloves, Crit Multi, Life and Fizz as extra fire on crit. Having said this, if you are lacking resists, attributes and whatnot, get them on the jewels, otherwise damage and more damage is good as well. To seal the deal on the gear department, the biggest item in this build yet are the boots. Fugitive boots with Tailwind on crit and chance to gain elusive on crit, alongside life, movement speed and the penetration enchantment. In these boots we are gonna socket dash and enduring cry linked to life tap and second wind. And believe it or not, I crafted these boots and initially they kinda bricked, because they rolled a crappy prefix, the elusive on crit and an open prefix. So I gambled an Iceling on Veil and luckily they didn't brick further. In fact, they got fixed quite nicely. Now, you don't need boots like this. In fact, the only useful modifier for 95% of you is the elusive, since that pairs nicely with evasion. But if you're feeling the player retention coursing through your veins, gamble yourself a pair of boots like these guys. Finally, we use a Jade Flask, a Wise Oak and a City's Promise. And that is it for the gear and gems. Some of these are absolute overkill and to some degree a bit on the currency sink side of things. But hey, you know the saying, there is no kill like overkill, and in today's Path of Exile, anything that makes a build smoother is a good investment. Which means that we get to cram as many shiny things into a character and we get to enjoy that fact. Just as a reminder, try to get as much Chaos Res anywhere and everywhere you can. That is mandatory nowadays. But with all of that said, let's discuss the skill tree. Alright, so this is a level 95 Chieftain. We sided with no bandits, and this also means that we get 2 additional points to spend at the cost of crit multi and resists. Nothing too bad, honestly. For Pantheons, Aracali and Tukohama are my choices, but feel free to grab any other Pantheons. Now, for the Ascendancy, Namahu for the fire conversion and extra fire damage, Hinekora for the life leech and covering enemies on Ash, Ramako for the fire penetration, and finally Balako for the endurance charge generation and damage if we lose an endurance charge. This last one is the reason why we use Enduring Cry and Immortal Call, which we are gonna spam as frequently as possible to get that damage boost but also to sustain those endurance charges. Moving on to the actual skill tree, it is actually quite simple yet a bit complex. We are rushing towards the ranger area, but also grabbing stuff along the way to this point. Things like accuracy and crit chance, fire penetration and the fire conversion mastery, sword crit on both sides including the sword crit chance and reduced crit multi mastery, projectile crit stuff, life, evasion and a grace reservation mastery, frenzies and a cluster jewel socket. However, one of our priorities is grabbing mana reservation efficiency in the duelist and ranger areas, including masteries for reservation efficiency and damage per aura affecting us. We are also investing into spell suppression to the point where we are gonna cap it, and we are taking 2 spell suppression masteries. 10% chance to suppress spell damage if boots, helmet and gloves have evasion, alongside crit chance from the spell suppression chance. Coming back to the cluster jewel socket, it is an 8 passive chunker, with Advanced Guard, Feed the Fury and Martial Prowess. We take all notables and invest 7 points in the jewel, and we also use a medium cluster with Quick Getaway and Basics of Pain. Finally, we also use some jewels. One is a Watcher's Eye with Fizz's extra fire damage while affected by anger, and attack speed while affected by precision. The rest are rare jewels with increased life, alongside intelligence and damage stuff, though with all honesty, all of them need attack speed. But that should be it for this skill tree. Nothing too fancy to be quite honest, but we definitely need to take all the notes previously mentioned. In fact, getting to 96 for a bit more crit will be nice, but otherwise this is enough. So with that said, let's wrap up this character. So by this point I am guessing that the video is already quite long, which is good for me because, as I said in the intro, I've got plenty of gameplay that I intend to cram into the video. As I said in the intro as well, I wasn't super sold on the character at first, because he wasn't very good at killing bosses. I had done some Shaper Guardians and the Conquerors and the times were quite slow, at least for me. So I decided to do more changes to the character and achieve something more akin to what I enjoy. Granted, the days of deleting content without using too much brain power are kinda gone. Player retention demands that you take longer achieving your goals, and that also means that the game needs more time invested into it so that you can iron out your character. The character himself was actually a pretty fun experience, though once I committed to the changes it felt even better and more enjoyable in both the damage and defensive side of things. And to be honest, I don't often build evasion because evasion wasn't very good before this patch. Nowadays, in combination with the spell suppression, it tends to feel rather nice, and this character is proof of that. Overall, a very fun build to play with, though it does require investment, but what doesn't nowadays? You could also make the argument that this one in particular didn't need as much, but I leave that opinion to you. Anyways, as I said in the intro, I've been playing a lot of Halo Infinite lately, and having a lot of fun with it. So I might make a video on it soon. I just gotta get more gameplay. After that, I guess we'll be back on PoE. I hear that Chain Hook can meme really hard if you pair it with a Barunastra and Rigwald's Savagery, so we might be doing that next. Otherwise, we might do a small visit to another action RPG from the ancient times. I'm not gonna tell you which one, so feel free to guess in the comments below. But that should be the plan, I think. And hey, if you got to this point and are new around here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, a rating and a comment are always appreciated. And with that said, thank you so much for watching the video. Take care, have a nice weekend, and peace out.